morning, Suncoast. How you guys doing? Let's sing this out. In love that erases my fear and draws me near your heart. Well, you will never let go through every high in love. Lord, I feel you washing over every part of me. I surrender as your presence brings me to my knees, and you still my restless heart. Pull me closer to your love. In your presence, I'm overwhelmed as you draw me to yourself. Still you know my name, and you show the greatest of love and won my heart with grace. Lord, I feel you washing over every part of me. I surrender as your presence brings me to my knees, and you still my restless heart. Pull me closer to your love. In your presence, I'm
Come Well, Suncoast, it's good to be here with you guys this morning. We have a new song for you that we want to introduce. So I have to tell you, I get asked quite a bit, like, you know, when do you feel closest to God? Like, what are your moments? And anytime I think about it, my mind always comes back to here, to with you guys in this moment. Worship's always been something that's been very special in my heart, and I just love singing with you all. So this song is it's by an artist, Brandon Lake, and it's Just Like Heaven. And this song stuck out to me because, one, the words are amazing, and it talks about God's presence, and not that, you know, you have to, like, it's not that God leaves and then you have to, like, ask him to come to you. You know, God's presence is there. He's always with you. But it's that recognition of his presence and that yearning for more. And that's the message of this song. So as we're singing today, just recognize his presence. Recognize the people around you in this singular voice that we have this morning to praise him and worship him and invite him in. So let's praise him.
Isn't it just like heaven when you walk into the room? There's not a thing that's hidden when every eye is on you. Can't get enough of your presence. It's a perfect point of view. Isn't it just like heaven? Come a little closer, stay a little longer. I can't get enough of you. Come a little closer, stay a little longer. I can't get enough of you. Doesn't it sound like heaven when you're singing over me? There's not a voice more constant. Your melodies, they never cease. Here I was standing in presence, in my true identity. Doesn't it sound like, yeah, it sounds like just like heaven. Come a little closer, stay a little longer. I can't get enough so much for singing with us this morning. It's been an honor and a pleasure. You may be seated.
Good morning. Let's try it again. Good morning. Now you're awake. It's Memorial Day weekend, and I'll take a few minutes just to express my gratitude for all those who have served in the armed forces, and especially those who have given their life in service of their country. I'm one who appreciates that. Also, it's interesting because the end of May, I think it's the 28th, I'm not sure exactly what date it is, 28th or 30th, my father-in-law was born in 1918. He's now, tomorrow in our home, we're having a birthday party for him, but he passed away in 2001. Can you imagine what a legacy that your family's still gathering, remembering you 20 years after you're gone? I hope they remember me 20 minutes after I'm gone. You know, and some people just saying, good riddance, what's his name? But I'm so, yeah, that's right, Pastor, what's his name? So, but I'm so glad to be here today. It's my joy to stand up. It's been a while since I stood up before you by myself, and I love the dialogues that we've had, and those are great things. So let me bring you up to speed on some things. It is Memorial Day, but we've been in this series called Practical Prescriptions 2.0. And if there's one word or two words I can use to describe them as we do these prescriptions every week, and if you haven't gotten the prescription, you'll have one in your hand for the end of the service, but you can get them on the table at Grand Central. So the first week we talked about confidence. Keep your head back, walk with your shoulders back, your head high, and smile. But confidence. The next week we talk about friendship, then self-care, then comparisons, stress, listening. Last week, blame. And that was a fun one, wasn't it? So, I still haven't got that video in my head, so I really enjoyed that all week. But today we're going to talk about ultimately the long way around. So let me get started. I know you all know about Moses, central figure in the Old Testament, but he could not talk Pharaoh into letting his people go. So it seems like after multiple attempts, all these plagues came up. The last plague was the plague of the firstborn, the death of the firstborn. And he said, Pharaoh, let my people go. Finally, Pharaoh says, just get out of here. And Israel leaves the bondage and begin as this huge herd of people toward the promised land, the land that God promised Abraham. So let me give you the first thought today. I'm going to give you three, and when I'm by myself, we can fly through this today. I don't have to drag those other people along. Number one, see, this is perfect for that segue, isn't it? When things seem hopeless, look again. Just about the time you thought, oh my gosh, it's Pastor Larry up there by himself, it's hopeless. Think again. In Exodus chapter 14, let's look at verse 13. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. See, after the plague of death and the release of Israel, Pharaoh began to have some second thoughts. You ever second guessed yourself? Maybe you wake up startled and you don't really know where you are, but you know things are not the way you thought. And I told this story a while back, but it's worth repeating. A couple of years ago, I was not sleeping as well because I had shoulder injuries. So I went upstairs to the guest room. my wife, it's not right for me to be tossing around and keeping her awake up all night. So I was trying to help her sleep. But in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, the fire alarm went off upstairs. It's pretty noisy. I jumped up and I looked, the room was full of smoke. I was horrified and I shouted, "Becky!" And I was starting to head toward the stairs to go rescue my wife. I blinked twice and all the smoke disappeared. I'd been sleeping in my contacts. And the battery needed to be changed and the smoke alarm is just chirping. But you ever have that kind of second thoughts that, no, that's not exactly my first impression. So you know what I've learned from that? Do not sleep in your contacts. Fair enough, so I don't. So when Pharaoh realized that he had allowed Israel to leave Egypt, he suddenly asked, what was I thinking? It's like he woke up. The fog had lifted and he says, hey, this is not what I really intended. I'm going to go get those guys. They need me. They're slaves. They're free labor. I'm their Pharaoh, they're mine. Get the chariots together. And it says they got 600 chariots and they pursued to bring the children of Israel back to Egypt, even after 10 plagues, and he finally agreed to let them go. He chased them to the Red Sea, some call the Reed Sea. But can you imagine these events in their time? So let's be one of the Israelites just for a moment. Moses came to bring us out of Egypt. And in the process, to be honest, Moses really made a mess of things. If you don't remember the story, because of the plagues and because of the ask, the Pharaoh said, they obviously have too much time on their hands, so give them more labor with less straw. Make them increase the quota and decrease the supplies. And it was brutal for them. But Moses kept at it. He was tenacious about this exodus. They'd seen the 10 plagues hit the land of Egypt. They finally were allowed to leave, and they followed him away from their place of bondage. But listen carefully. You know how long they've been in Egypt? 430 years. That's a lot longer than this country's been in existence. They'd been there 430 years. Egypt was their home. Now they were leaving Egypt on a promise and a dream. And I'm sure some were saying, Egypt's not so bad. Others were saying, I don't want to change. And then there's always someone that says, I really miss making bricks. When Suncoast began, we met in schools for 9 years before we ever owned a building. 9 years in schools. We set up and tore down every week for 9 years. And when we moved into this building in 2007, this is no kidding, someone said, I sort of miss the school. And I go, yeah, you weren't here every morning setting up and tearing down. And as much as I tease about that, there was something magic about those moments setting up and tearing down. But there's some people that are always adverse to change. There's always those who love the familiar, and maybe you're one of those, and that's okay. There's something frightening about newness, about the unknown. Regardless, they were uprooted from Egypt on their way to the promised land. And as they looked back, they saw this cloud and they realized, what is it? It's Pharaoh and all his chariots heading for us. We're in trouble. They began to be in despair. They began to panic. They did what we would have done. Blame the leader. It's not our fault, it's Moses' fault. Didn't you remember the video last week? She dropped her coffee and immediately she blamed her husband. In 1.2 seconds, she blamed her husband. She played the blame game. So do we. Israel asked, and I love these questions, didn't they have enough graves in Egypt? See the sarcasm? Didn't we say to you when we were in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than die in this desert. I told you, Moses, this was a stupid idea. Now, if that doesn't sound like us, it's very close. There's always a negative element that sees gloom and despair in each situation. I'm sure even Moses had a moment of despair. Then he remembered, hey, it was real, that moment at the burning bush. He remembered the plagues, all the instructions of God. In that moment, there were real issues confronting the leadership of the people. They had a lack of trust, they had a lack of confidence. It seemed that there was no hope, no way of escape. Now let me ask you this question. Have you ever been in a place in your life where you just were near panic because you felt, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this? I've gotten myself in a circumstance, and I really don't know the answer. Well, let me share a story about me. In the mid-1980s, I was about 35 years old. I was part of a denomination who wanted to advertise and let the world know about what this denomination was about. They were a very unknown, small denomination. So they went to one of the huge ad companies in the nation that did all the Kodak commercials and things like that. And they came up with this, "Our church can be your home." And it was professionally done, 30-second, 1-minute ads. And they spent thousands and thousands on these ads. And what their plan was to go around the country and bring local churches together in the area and say, "Look, we're going to give these to you free. You just pay for the airtime." Pretty good idea. So I was there one day when they had this meeting. I was in Fort Myers. And my very good friend Jay, we were in seminary together, pastored a small church. So because none of the other pastors wanted to do it, they asked Jay to take care of it. So Jay's an up-and-coming guy, sharp. He said, I'll lead the charge, and he did. And I asked Jay after this meeting, this initial meeting, "Jay, can I borrow this video cassette tape? Back there is a VCR. Remember those? The big tapes like this? Can I borrow that? I want to show Becky." Because, we grew up in the church. We'd been in their headquarters area. We knew a lot of things about that. And then the next week, I'll bring it back. The next weekend, we had this big meeting with denominational leaders, TV executives, salespeople. It was going to be a big deal. "Can I borrow the tape?" He said, "Sure." So I took it home. I had a brand new VCR. One of these remote control things. You could record TV shows, whatever you wanted. From the air, not from cable or something. It's different today. But one evening I showed Becky those ads. I know that remote control, and we were both impressed how well they were produced. Went and put the kids to bed. About an hour later, came back in, and I look, and the record light's on the VCR. And I went, "Oh no." I rewound it. 30 minutes of Remington Steel, where there were thousands of dollars worth of advertisements just moments before. And you know what I did? I went, oh no. I was about to panic. In a few days, we're going to gather with all these churches, just a few days, all these leaders, TV executives, all these people. I just about had a panic attack, and I've never had one. But I thought to myself, I'm going to have to lie to get out of this one. That's the first thought that went through my head, honestly. Then I thought, I will not lie no matter what. I'll take it. The next day I thought, Actually, just a few minutes I thought, The next day, I called the headquarters of that denomination in Kansas City. And I asked for the guy in charge of the communication department. And I located the guy in charge, and guess what? He was an acquaintance of mine. His name was Paul Skiles. I said, "Paul, this is what I did. It's a dumb thing." I erased it. He just started laughing. He said, "Well, didn't they have the little notch pushed out?" "No, they didn't." He said, "Well," I said, "Can you send me another? I'll overnight it to you." So there I had the tape. Now you think I'd feel pretty good about that. I really felt great. But I gotta tell you, when I feel really great, I get really naughty. So when the day of the big meeting came, I walked up to Jay. I said, "Jay," I showed back the commercials, and I came back, and the recorder light's on. I erased all the commercials. I just stood there and watched him. Sheer panic. It was awesome. And he goes, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" I said, "Oh, I already got a new tape." For years, he says, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you." That's my sixth sense of humor. I just wanted to see what I looked like. The children of Israel had begun to panic. They blamed Moses, then they blamed God. I can almost hear Moses saying, "Look, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Don't panic. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of God." For 430 years, they were in bondage. They left Egypt only to die in the desert. The panic. Take a deep breath. Moses holds up the staff of God. It used to be his staff, but he threw it down. Now it became God's staff. And the sea began to divide. The water stacked up. They walked through on dry ground, and the chariots followed them into the mire and the muck, and the waves came back over, and no more Egyptian army. Now that's a great story just in itself, but it sets us up for lessons. How many lessons did Pharaoh need? Many. What about us? How many lessons do we need? Well, I want to give you one more today, and it's the next thought in your notes. God most often leads us through the long way around. In Exodus 13, beginning with verse 17, let me just tell you what it says. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though it was shorter. For God said if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people the long way around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. Here's my observation. Our way is shortcuts. God likes the long way around. God did not lead them through the shortcut. And if you want to read more about that, you can go to Numbers chapter 14 and following, and you read about Caleb and Joshua. They sent spies into the land, and they came back. They had an opportunity to possess the land. But the vote was 10-2, and God led them the long way around. In 2016, several of us from Suncoast rode a bus from Israel down through the Sinai Peninsula, down to where Mount Sinai was, where they made this journey. And I want to tell you, it's the most desolate place on the face of the earth I've ever been. It's like riding across the face of the moon. Almost no vegetation, rocks, and just barren land. We went to see Father Joseph at a monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai, where some of the most ancient biblical texts are still in their library, but they won't let people get to them because they're private. So how far was it? 200 miles. Less than a half hour by jet, 2 hours by a small plane, 4 hours by bus, 10 days if you're going to walk it. How long did it take them? 40 years. Can you imagine? How far is that? About from here to Fort Lauderdale. Can you imagine you're going to take off walking? It takes you 40 years to get there? It's a long time. We drive it a lot quicker. They'd been there in Egypt 430 years. For generations, they'd been in bondage. Now they're at the river, at the border of the promised land, everything they dreamed of. And God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though it was shorter. Why didn't he lead them through the Philistine country? Because the Philistines were warriors. They were tough. And Israel was not ready. Have you ever noticed how people want things sooner than later? We want it now. We live in an instant age today. Everything is instant. Fast computers, information. We email. There's no snail mail much. We don't wait at the post office. We have cell phones, texting, Twitter, Instagram, Netflix, YouTube. Waiting today is frustrating, especially if you have a slow internet connection, right? We live in the age of speed and transformation and information. But I want to ask this question. Let's slow down just for a moment and listen. How long does it take for God to grow a tree? Right outside the front door, there are these huge live oak trees. You can't put your arms around them. They were in excess of 100 years old. You can't grow a tree like that overnight. God often takes a long time to grow a tree, but he takes a long way around in the development of a life, or your soul or mine. We have not arrived there yet, but I believe we're all on the journey. Why did God send them the long way around instead of through the land of the Philistines? They weren't ready yet. Which leads me to the last thought of the day. It's this. True transformation takes time. You know, it takes time to transform our mindset. And it really takes time to transform the mentality of a slave. See, the children of Israel, they had slave minds. They'd been slave how long? 430 years. They had slave minds, slave dispositions, slave attitudes. They're used to people telling them what to do. And if they'd taken the shortcut, they probably would have failed. The story says they came out of Egypt armed for war. You know what that means? They were slaves. They came out with shovels, homemade weapons, sticks, garden instruments, old knives, going against chariots and armor and trained men. It's only too possible they weren't ready for the promised land. You see, once you go to the promised land, there are battles to fight, wars to engage in, and the Israelites were too attached to slavery. To truly fight for freedom would come later. The children of Israel were children. There's an old saying, it takes a steady hand to hold a full cup of water. If you had a little child with you today, a little 2 or 3 year old kid, and they wanted something to drink, you wouldn't give them one of those big gulp cups full to the rim. If you did, that'd be disaster. You give them a small cup with not much in it. And I can tell people who haven't parented lately when they give kids too much to drink. I go, oh, that's a mistake. I mean, we like to give them a bottle of water, pour some of it out before you give it to them. Why? Because we have the experience of knowing it takes a steady hand to hold a full cup of water. Moses and the people were on the journey, but not ready to possess the promised land. So let me tell you my story. In 1988, I entered a PhD program at Florida State. I'd been out of school since 81. I'd gone 4 years of college, 4 years of graduate school. Now I was in a PhD program. And I wanted to finish early. I thought I could do it in 3 years. But I can tell you, it took me longer. I'm a finisher. If I can't, I won't start it because I don't think I can finish it. But this I wanted to do, something I'd always wanted to do. And instead of 3 years, it took me 7 years to get through the program. That's a long time. Some things just take longer than you think. And now think of Suncoast Community Church. 23 years ago, Suncoast Community Church was started. I'd had this epiphany from God to start a church. I'd already been a denominational pastor. I was out of ministry for a while. But I started Suncoast, and I need to be honest with you, I wish, instead of 41, I wish I'd been 31. I'd like to have an extra 10 years. Does that make sense? You ever think of that? I wish I'd started this a little earlier. I mean, I had 2 teenagers in middle school together. You know, Becky did the children, my kids did the music. It was a perfect thing. You know, when people plant churches, normally they're not 41 years old. Usually they're a rookie right out of school. Of course, I always thought that was ridiculous. You take the person with the least experience and you ask them to do the most difficult job on the face of the earth. Sounds like church, doesn't it? But some of us, I was 41. I was a late bloomer. I wasn't ready until I was 41. I can only imagine in my journey that God takes me the long way around. If I'd planted this church 10 years earlier, it would not be what it is today. It may not be here at all because I don't think I was ready. See, sometimes it's in the timing. And sometimes he has to take us to the long way around. Sometimes we need experience. We need to have some of the lessons of life. We need to fail a few times before we understand how we can succeed. There's an old saying that says, what we get too easily, we esteem too lightly. And that which we work hard for, we appreciate it a little more. Still, in our society today, we like shortcuts. I'm no exception. If I'm in a long line of traffic, oh, for a shortcut. We want it now. We don't want to have to wait, to save, to scratch, to sacrifice for the prize. Too much, too soon is a perfect formula for mediocrity. Right? Sometimes it takes a while. And if you want to be the best version of you that you can be, sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice some things today, time and effort, and maybe resource for the greater good the next week or the next year. See, on our journey, we may pray for riches to give and receive poverty to trust. We may pray for strength so that I can serve God and find illness that teaches us to depend on God. We may get nothing that we ask for, but everything we hope for as God takes us on this journey. I've been on the journey for a long time. I'm still on it. How's it going for you? I probably should be a lot further along. But it seems like I just keep going around Sinai one more time. Not because God sends me there, it's just because I'm just a little stubborn. Maybe I haven't learned my lesson. It's not about a quick prayer answered for us. It's about a journey where God is shaping our character and life. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago, neither am I. I think I'm a more mature. I've got the things that are displaying that to be true. I'm more experienced, I'm more mature, I'm less tense. See, it's about a journey where God is shaping our character. It's about a life of faith, trust, despite the tendency to want it now. I love to tell about my friend, Larissa Commons. She's a fantastic artist. I've told you this before, but it's worth repeating. She at one point, we all had little children, and she was always trying to keep the kids busy. And she'd pass out pieces of paper and crayons or whatever, and all the little kids sitting at a little picnic table. She'd say, okay, draw a picture, whatever you want. And you know how little kids are. They hold their crayons. They're not like this. They're holding their crayons like this. And they're doing shapes, and it looks just like nonsense. But she'd look at it for a few minutes, she'd go, And being an artist, she'd see something. And the next thing you know, there's a horse running where there were circles before, or waves, or a boat, or an airplane. And it was amazing to me how she could take something that was just pure scribble and chaos and turn it into something that had meaning. You know, when I take a few minutes and reflect, when I think about my life and all the random marks on the piece of paper, when God gets it and takes care of it, all of a sudden, he pours value and meaning, and something beautiful comes out of something that was just chicken scratch. You say, was that your drawing, Pastor? No, that's my handwriting. But when we take a moment and reflect, we make a choice and trust our lives and circumstances to God. This is what I honestly believe. Our hearts begin to be transformed into something of value, something with character. It doesn't come quickly. It takes a while. Our journey is not about us getting somewhere quickly. It's about our lives being transformed a little bit every day and shaped where more and more I begin to bear and reflect the image of Christ in my life. We begin to see this greater picture. We begin to be honest and develop integrity, but it takes time. No one grows from a baby to an adult in an instant. No one grows to maturity in a moment. If in the life of being a Christ follower, there's no prayer pill that I can swallow and all of a sudden I'm just a mature Christ follower. It takes time. And there's no better time to begin than now. Can I pray for you? Father, in moments like these, we are being challenged on our journey to allow Christ to be in the center of our life. My prayer for my friends today is that no matter how frustrated we are in the middle of a circumstance, when we want it now, just help us take a deep breath and realize some things just take time. Today, Father, work in our hearts as only you can. We'll give you thanks in Christ's name. Amen. Would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a closing story, but before I do, I want you to take out your practical prescription card. You see that? See the card? If you can't see it, it's right there on the screen. So I want you to say out loud. I'm going to say it first, and you can say out loud with me. It takes time to grow a tree and me. Now say it with me. It takes time to grow a tree and me. Boy, that's a good lesson for the week. Put it somewhere, read it every day, and I think it'll help your life on your journey. So here's my closing story. In 2010, Becky and I went on a cruise, and it began in Portugal. We arrived a few days early, we rented a car, and we drove to Seville, Spain. Now, Seville, Spain is the place famous for bullfighting, and also it's where Christopher Columbus' tomb is in Seville, Spain. The population is about 1.5 million people in the metro area, but in the center is the old city. And we were staying in a hotel in the center of town, and I'd rented a car, a little Russian car, diesel car, and drove all the way there. And once I got there, we drove around that city in a circle, and I just couldn't find my way. Now, I'm a seasoned traveler, and I have an uncanny sense of direction. And one day we're driving down this lane, so I think this is the right lane. And the lane gets narrower, and it's getting narrower. And here we are in a foreign country. I'm driving, and we're narrower and narrower. Finally, the mirrors are scraping on either side of the building. And Becky says, I think you're on a sidewalk. Well, I backed up. I'm not kidding, that's true. I backed up, went around. We drove an hour trying to find our way. Finally, I thought, what are we going to do? How are we going to get there? I do not know. And I pulled up, there was a line of cabs. I said, I got an idea. And I pulled up and anybody speak English? Yes. Can you take me to this hotel? We just want to follow you. Yes, I know where it is. How much? €5. It's a bargain. So I said, follow. So I followed him. He made a few turns, which I would have never made on my own. We pulled up in front of the hotel, and I gave him the €5. We parked the car in an underground garage for that whole time. I took a deep breath and going, oh my gosh. And you know, when we left town, we had about the same amount of trouble. It was my navigator. Oh, that's last week, wasn't it? Yeah. But here's the point. In the circle of life, when we're confused, we're tired of fighting, panic, and chaos, I want you to know there's a guide waiting who knows his way around life better than we do. His name is Jesus, and we follow him. I'm here to remind you, he loves you today. So do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.
no matter